Welcome to the realm of ideas is free to all. This is the preview for episode 62, the nature of the adventurous mind. This is a series of ruminations we do once a week on Sundays. Oh, Puddle, look at you all tasseled and all kind of windblown,
Look
windswept.
at my windswept
Look
hair.
at you. Yeah, you.
Windswept.
Yes.
Hey, P.
Hi, P.
Look at that.
I know. Okay. So anyway, this is about the adventurous mind. We talked about the kind of nature of ideas. We've been talking about a lot of different things in terms of the relationship of interconnectedness and the nature of kind of research and the way in the nature of things. Anyway, actually, if you missed, if you've been keeping up with us, the two last shows that we've done, the Beauty of Original Ideas and the anniversary issue, these were two really, really good issues. And I think we kind of clarified a lot of things that we had been kind of leading up to. So if you're just kind of joining in for the first time, by all means, go back and look at these because these were pretty special. Anyway, so what is this? I mean, I basically remember describing to Julie this idea of that's Julie right there, of the fact that she had an adventurous mind, and that was kind of the thing that most drew me to her. I mean, aside from above and beyond actually all the other things like her beauty and her talent and her imagination and her creativity, but her curiosity and imagination were that part that kind of really gave me into the nature of her adventurous mind. So again, reading from one of my favorite books, Adventures of Ideas, basically, the last like one of the last chapters in the the last group, when he's talking about beauty, love, truth, adventure, and peace, those things which kind of like as somewhat of the basis of the culture of which we're looking back. I mean, if you don't, let me give a brief overview of Venture Ideas. Ventures of Ideas is basically a chart of, rather than a kind of depiction of the events of Western history, it's basically the kind of like characteristics of how in which the principles of the Western society developed. And one of the things he talks about, which is actually very interesting, is that you don't copy the past to make the future. The way in which the future is made is in the adventurous nature of the individuals who will create it. And I think too many times we're either we hate the genius of our time, or we basically kind of look back to previous genius. What we need to do always at any time is not to kind of believe in the kind of static aspects. And in Adventure, which is kind of like chapter 19, he talks about this very specific thing. Let me give you a kind of piece here. I put forward as a general definition of civilization that a civilized society is exhibiting the 5 qualities of truth, beauty, adventure, art, and peace. Hereby the last quality of peace, I am not referring to political relations. I mean a quality of mind steady in its reliance that fine action is treasured in the nature of things. And then later he talks about no static maintenance of perfection is possible. The axiom is rooted in the nature of things. Advance or decadence are the only choices offered to mankind. So these are the two kind of like principles, or two of the principles, that one balances the adventure of the spirit as the spirit continues to move in a positive direction. And as he says, it's either towards progress or decadence. And that's the kind of thing that I think we have to understand. Anyway, the adventurous mind craves that adventure. They crave that sensation. They crave that reality. That's their conquest. That's their battlefield. And I think, that's the kind of thing we're going to talk about. And I think I want to kind of know, I kind of already do know Julie's somewhat about Julie's adventure and the nature of who she is, but I really want to kind of like, we're going to delve into maybe kind of like, talking about the differences between the way in which both of us kind of found ourselves here.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Say.
Well, I believe that there are a lot of misinterpretations and misunderstandings. Not that it's a term that most people use, the adventurous mind, because it's so very rare. In fact, We don't hear anyone else ever use that term.
No, I mean,
Right.
I
So
think,
yeah, I
I
mean,
honestly, I didn't make up the term. We didn't make up the term,
no,
but
but
it's something that I think
um,
we use, but I don't think I've ever heard it either.
no, no. My point is, on the few occasions that I've said that to anyone outside of the two of us,
Hmm.
it's it's instantly misinterpreted as operatic, as fanfare, as dramatic, as melodramatic. It is very much
Hmm. Oh.
misinterpreted as something grandiose, as something, I would say something misinterpreted as
Interesting.
entertainment when it's really personal intellection. And it is not a proscenium, it is an elegant platform, like a scholar's rock
Hmm.
on a desk for personal adventure, personal imagination, and the discoveries therein.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
foundational. I mean, I think
yeah.
that's an interesting point. Is a lot of times people think of, adventurous people as like arrogant, obnoxious, iconoclastic, and all kind of these things that are kind of portrayed in negative. But again, in a retrograde society, the person who's actually the bedrock of your civilization will seem, very intimidating and kind of otherly. I think when you're in a situation or kind of society that's growing and rather than one that's decaying, you will see a different approach than the one we see now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of times, and this goes back to the something you just said that kind of
Hmm.
awakened an idea in me,
Oh,
is that a
good.
lot of times we think about dramatic, over operatic, overly technique. And in fact, the reality is not to be grandiose. The idea is to be fundamental. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
the adventurous mind, is not just an eccentric who's just kind of going out in the void. I mean, Ortega talks about this really well in the fact that the individual, as Whitehead says, the time in which you are gives you two opportunities to rise and to fail. Because in the case of process, you have to basically find something that is stable for a moment and then be able to kind of maintain that stability until as long as you can. In the case of the static kind of civilization that Ortega talks about, it's about the fact that during the dynamics of society, you either understand that which you are and be able to kind of like rise above it and kind of create a progress, or fall behind and get into retrograde kind of circumstance. When I look at the tribalism, the feral kind of like nature of the way in which people are today, I see ourselves disconnecting ourselves from not just the things that have proven to be valuable. I'm not saying that the society that's past isn't past. I'm saying we're undermining the fundamental things that will carry us from where we were to where we need to be. And I think that that's one of the problems that I see.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I do feel that the adventurous mind is an intimate kind of adventure, which can certainly be manifested or visualized. I mean, I I strive for that in my work as a science painter through metaphor, through our work in drawing, my work in writing, Bruce's work in constructing his metaphorical models. But I do think that the truly adventurous mind is many things at once. It is the entire swath of forest outside of that adventurous mind. And it is a crystalline conifer needle held in the palm of the hand of that same entity with the adventurous mind. That is the true breath, is imagination and I should say a boundless, inventive, and creative intellect is the true definition in my mind of the adventurous mind. And it sees all paths at once, it pursues all paths in multiple ways: metaphor, analogy, writing, drawing, building. It's how we read, it's how we process information. And the exploration of beautiful information is the terrain of the adventurous mind.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed. And I think that's
that's
kind
my
of a
summation.
agreed. And I think that as uh, things move through process and certain things kind of wither and other things emerge, there is an interconnectedness. One of the things that Whitehead talks about is the kind of like metaphysical circumstance that kind of brought about the way in which we misunderstood logic and we misunderstood the way in which metaphysics took place, and how he corrected that gave us rise to the idea of understanding not only the fact that we're not in a static universe, and that things aren't isolated and there isn't a kind of substantial nature, but a process nature. And the second thing is the fact that like the interconnectedness, which was, I mean, he kind of talks about two fundamental problems, one by Aristotle, one by Plato. He talks about Plato's kind of sense of the kind of static nature, and he talks about the Aristotle in terms of the fact that there's a missing interconnectedness. That's what I think is happening here, is that in the transition from where we were in the kind of like traditional Euro-American Western society to where we are going to go, there is an interconnectedness between the withering of one and the kind of generation of the other. So we've gone from a kind of like Euro-American centric universe or world to a kind of like a global centric universe, and there's a lot of conflict. But I think how we unravel those things that are not necessary, but how we connect those things from the past to those things that will basically be the fundamental future, is the result of the adventurous minds understanding the difference, understanding the unbreakable bond between creativity and circumstance. That makes sense.
Very eloquently
Thank you, P.
said.
Thank you, Pete. I'm a genius, remember?
I will, yes.
I had two geniuses.
Thank you.
I
would love to say, I don't want it to go on too long, but this is a really key hypothesis. Well, actually, we've proven this over and over.
Yeah.
The truly adventurous mind is not a sedentary mind. It is not a static mind. In fact, you would use the word static, which brought up this thought that it is a kinetic mind. It is constantly in motion. And the very ironic thing is that almost no one except, I'd say nobody except another adventurous mind can sense that motion.
I think so.
They actually misinterpret the motion as arrogance, as imperiousness. It is that based on the virtue and the superiority of our ideas, but it is a constant motion. It's a progressive and kinetic. It's dancing, it's thrashing, it's transforming. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
In fact, just one of the things that ironic is the fact that, like, being called arrogant and insolent and all kinds of
we've both been called that quite a bit.
Thank you. Is that, it's funny because in certain times when you have names like you would have in the 15th century or in the 17th century, especially the 17th century, and you would have situations where people would understand this is an era of greatness, an era of genius. What's ironic is when that genius deserts us and we are left with kind of somewhat marginal or kind of like mediocre figures, that is the time when people get, maybe it's because they become tribal and feral and kind of defensive, is they're much more protective than they were it seems, of the great geniuses. Because today it seems as if it's much easier for us to question, the genius of the 17th century, which was one of the greatest centuries, not the greatest century there ever was, as opposed to like the incredibly mediocre kind of minds that kind of are holding us back now. And I think, this idea of like, who are you to do this? Or what do you think you're up to? And I'm thinking
they're much more threatened.
Yeah. And then maybe it's because people get much more threatened by it, because
much more threatened.
Maybe the irony is the fact that because there is no leadership, people cling to people who are kind of like hollow vessels.
Very easy to follow a mediocre mind. It's unchallenging.
Or desperation.
It's desperation. It demands nothing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, you know what? Let's go back and read that piece in Freud about the idea of the, like when he's, talking about those hollow idols and how people. Let's read that this week.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so that's it for now. So we'll see you on Sunday morning. And like I said, go back and watch these last two if you
Yeah.
haven't. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny because it's interesting because like there wasn't a lot of attention paid to these, and it was
I was
funny
really
because
kind of
yeah, it was
floored.
really kind of interesting. So go back and watch them, not because but I think that there was a lot that was
Because we said
yeah,
so.
because we said so. Because no, I think it's because there was a lot that was kind of wrapped up and brought and kind of culminated, and it was I think that maybe
They were beautifully
they were.
complex. They
All
were
right.
really,
So anyway, the realm
yeah.
of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of all for us to keep it this way.
Precisely.